Hi guys, so today we're going to be talking about sampling and error, and before we get started with our first example, let's take a look at a definition. Okay, so obviously when we're doing experiments or surveys and things like that, we want it to be accurate as possible. And so to be sure that survey results actually represent what is true, what is represents what we know of the population, polling organizations need to make sure that they poll a random or unbiased sample of the population. Okay. So let's take a look at our first example of that. Okay. So we're going to state whether each method would produce a random sample, right? So meaning would it be unbiased, or at least as unbiased as we can be. Okay, so here it says, asking every 10th person coming out of a gym how many times a week they exercise to determine how often city residents exercise. Okay, so this would not represent a random sample, right? Not result in a random sample. Result in a random sample. Okay. The reason why is because if they're going to the gym, they're at least exercising once a week, right? How could you then know how many people don't exercise or don't even go to the gym, right? Because clearly if you're just asking people who come out of the gym, they're probably gym rats or they love working out and things like that. And so that's probably not representative of the city as a whole, okay? And so because the average surveyed person probably exercises more often than the average person. And also, the gym probably might not be a good idea, because what about the people who exercise but they don't do it at a gym, etc., etc. So it's not really good at capturing what the residents actually do. Okay, so B here, surveying people going into an Italian restaurant to find out people's favorite type of food. Okay? So this would also not result in a random sample. Spelled random wrong. Random sample. Right? Because if they're coming out of Italian restaurant, that probably means they at least like Italian. Okay? So because the people surveyed would probably be more likely than others to like Italian. Okay. And so then that would skew it if it was like, 95% of people's favorite food is Italian, and you only ask people outside of an Italian restaurant, right? That seems kind of unfair. So why don't you try CYP1, and then once you're done, come check the answer. Okay, you should have gotten something along these lines for CYP1. This would not result in a random sample because the people would probably be more likely than others to prefer to watch golf on TV if they're on a golf course. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at example 2, which is on margin of error. So margin of sampling error. If the percent of people in a sample responding in a certain way is P, and the size of the sample is N, then 95% of the time the percent of the population responding in that same way will be between P minus ME and P plus ME, where the margin of your sampling error equals 2 times the square root of P times 1 minus P over N. So that is the probability is 95% that P plus or minus ME will contain the true population results. so here we have, in a survey of 1,000 randomly selected adults, 37% of them answered yes to a particular question. What is the margin of error? Okay. So margin of error equals 2 times the square root of p. This p stands for the percentage responding in a certain way, times 1 minus p over n. And n is our sample size. So here, in this case, we're surveying 1,000 adults, so our sample size is going to be that 1,000 for n. And then since 37% answered yes, p, which is percentage that responded in a certain way, will be 37%. Okay. So the margin of error here equals 2 square root, that I should write 2 big enough, okay? And 37%, 0.37 times 1 minus 0.37 all over 1,000. Okay. Then I'm going to enter that in. Okay. And this gives me approximately 0.030535. And that's how many digits the book does. Okay. So what that means is the margin of error is about 3%. Okay. And so what that means is there is a 95% chance that the people who would say yes, people who would say yes is between 37% plus or minus 3. Okay. Or in other words, 34% to 40. There we go. Okay. So why don't you try CYP2, and then once you're done, come check the answer. Okay, you should have gotten that the margin of error is 3%, which means that there's a 95% chance that the people who would say they purchase music is between 78 plus or minus the 3, or between 75% of people to 81% of people would say that they purchase music. Okay. If you got that right, you can move on to our last example. If not, here is your explanation. Okay. So here, this is our percentage that would respond a certain way, and so that goes in for P in the formula. Okay. Since we surveyed 625 randomly selected teens, that is our sample size and goes in for N. Then you enter it in your calculator, you get approximately 0.03314. And this as a percent is 3%. Okay, last example. So in a recent Gallup poll, 25% of the people surveyed said they had smoked cigarettes in the past week. Okay? The margin of error was 3%. How many people were surveyed? Okay? So this is the margin of error. So I'm going to write it as a decimal. That's going to be, let me write the formula first. So ME, margin of error, equals 2 times the square root of P, right, percentage of people responding a certain way, times 1 minus P over the amount of people surveyed. Okay, so in this case, we are looking for N. Okay, so we know the margin of error is 3%, so that's going to go in for this. Okay, we know that 25% of them are saying that they had smoked cigarettes in the past week, so that's percentage of people responding a certain way, so that'll be P. So margin of error, 3% is 0.03 equals 2 times 25% is 0.25, 1 minus 0.25, and then we're looking for N. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do, since this is 2 times this square root, I'm going to divide by 2. So 0.03 divided by 2 is 0.015. I'm just going to simplify this. 1 minus 0.25 is 0.75. Okay. Then, what I'm going to do, running out of space, is to get rid of the square root, I'm going to square both sides. So squaring 0.015 is 0.00 225 equals, and then so I'm just going to simplify this. The 0.25 times 0.75 is 0.1875 over n. I'm going to multiply n on both sides. This becomes 0.000225, n equals 0.1875. I'm going to divide by my 0.000225, but by 0.000225. This will give me n by itself equals this gives me approximately 833.33333 people, but obviously you can have 0.33333 of a person, so we're going to round it up, so it's about 833 people who were surveyed. Okay, there you go. Okay, so why don't you try CYP3, and once you're done, come check the answer. Okay, you should have gotten about 319 people. If you got that right, you can get started on homework. If not, here is your explanation. Okay. So in a recent survey, 15% of the people surveyed said they had missed a class or a meeting because they overslept. The margin of error was 4%. How many people were surveyed? Okay. So since 15 of the people responded in some ways, that is our P. Okay. Our margin of error is 4%. So that is here for n. Okay. Then I'm solving for n, so since this is 2 times the square root, I'm going to get rid of the times 2 by divide by 2 on both sides. That leaves me with this. And then I also just simplified the 1 minus 0.15. Okay. Then I'm going to get rid of the square root by squaring both sides. So 0.02 squared is 0.0004. And on this side removes the square root. And then I just also simplified the 0.15 times 0.85 to get this. Okay. Since n is on the bottom, I'm going to multiply both sides by n, so that way it's now on top. Here. Okay. And then since this is 0.0004 times n, I divided it on both sides to get n by itself, and that's 318.75 people, and so I just rounded up to 319 people. If you said 318 people, that is also fine. Okay. So that's it for today. Have a great rest of the day. Bye, guys.